right, so it's going to be a fast-paced, quick hour as we look at some resources, strategies, and activities suggestions to support communicating student learning and student self-assessment of the core competencies in relation to POPEY's K-3 literacy mandate. So it'll be a quick tour through some resources available from the ministry, also some POPEY created resources. And then as always, we'll give you some demonstrations for what that can look like, some mentor text suggestions as well, and hopefully leave you with some additional resources and strategies that you can use in the coming weeks as you work on your year-end reporting and all of those things to wrap up this fast-paced, wild month of June. So all of the resources that I'm sharing today will be on the Padlet. So you can see there, we've got a column for ministry resources, a column for POPEY resources, and then the two articles that I referenced in some of the slides coming up. And a new one I just added to the POPEY resources, which I didn't add before I put this picture in here, is we have some core competencies book lists. So books to support communication, books to support thinking, and books to support personal and social competencies, and to launch those conversations. So those are now in the Padlet as well. And I'll show you a slide of those later so you can see what they look like. So here are goals for the next hour. We'll be looking at those ministry documents and resources in relation to some changes, recent changes and updates to the reporting protocols for the province. So we'll look at their proficiency scale. Jen and I created an early reading continuum to help with that, looking at some considerations for how we can assess play-based learning and what some guidelines there are before the final stretch where we're focusing in on the core competencies and supporting our students thinking about their own competencies and how we can launch those conversations, and some resources for self-assessment by the students, as well as how we can launch those conversations. So we'll just do a really quick check-in because this is all about social emotional learning and the core competencies. So which Muppet do you most identify with at the moment? So you can say the feeling, you can say the character if you want, add that into the chat box. And lucky you if you're feeling fabulous like Miss Piggy today. All of this is grounded in a lot of the updates to the curriculum and the reporting have to do with grounding things in BC's curriculum model, which is what students know, do, and what they understand. And that is a guiding model or framework. So what it's evolved to over the years and the decades is we're more focusing in on concepts and competencies that are more open and transferable skills. So it's deeper, transferable learning, active engagement of students. So it's not so much maybe like when we were in elementary school about how many times tables we know, or how many sentences we can write for a story, or how long we can do silent reading for, but it's about the thinking and the competencies, not just the core competencies, but also the curricular competencies, and that shift towards more of a strength-based model rather than a deficit-based model, and focusing in and using the negative language around what students can't do or are minimally able to do, but looking at where students are at and at promise and what they're on the brink of, and how we can set learning goals for them to guide them forward as well and be empowered learners. And this comes from one of the ministry documents as well. You'll see there at the bottom left, there's the link there showing what document that's from, and that's in the Padlet as well. And so thinking of assessment, not just the final grade or report card, but being more cyclical in nature, being part of the learning cycle, that it's formative, it's differentiated. So just like our instruction is differentiated, so is our assessment. And we can co-construct assessment tools, rubrics, conversations with our students and have them actively involved. And as I mentioned, it's all strength-based and includes goal setting. And just like we're talking to our students about about those reading and writing strategies that they need to know. And we're explaining what good readers do and what good writers do and how good readers think and the strategies and the toolkit they can use and draw on in a literacy arena. We're also wanting to talk to them about, as students and citizens, what their strengths are, to know what their strengths are, and then set some goals for what they could be working on next and make it really transparent. And this is a lovely reference from Joe Crona, who is the former head of FINESS, the First Nations Education Steering Committee, and it echoes that differentiating instruction and assessment so that we're giving access points for all of the students in our schools and in our classrooms, rather than it being a one size fits all, which, as we know, one size does not fit all, and our classrooms are so diverse. So thinking about that, responding to our students and their needs and their strengths, including being versatile and flexible in how we assess. So POPEY, in this past fall, we made a few new resources to support these changes to the K-12 student reporting policy and the new provincial proficiency scale. This is a screenshot of this new page on our website. So it's linked out in our Padlet as well. You can also find it on our website in the curriculum section. So some of these are editable and auto downloads, but some guidelines and resources there to give you some language, some sentence starters, some phrases for that descriptive feedback, and things that you can ground your assessment language and reporting on if you're feeling like you're needing something like that. And here's our early reading continuum, showing readers' behaviors as they developed from left to right. So this is just page 1 here, looking at these different behaviors that we're supporting our students to develop. And here we go. So you can see for that second row, using punctuation for phrasing and intonation, then the continuum developing into using fluent and phrased reading and rereading, and then doing that phrasing and expression over longer portions of text. So it builds very gradually over K-3. And then the provincial proficiency scale. Again, this is an evolution of the language that we used to see. If you've been teaching a while like me, you might have relied heavily on the performance standards. And that language, they've just been a fabulous resource for me back in my classroom days teaching English language arts K-6. But if you're familiar with that, feel free, if you've used them, relied on them, still use them, share in the chat box if you'd like to. But I think you remember that the language was more deficit based in that it was not yet minimally meeting. And so with the evolution of the proficiency scale, the language is shifting to be more strength-based and more supportive and more positive. So now we're looking at emerging, developing, proficient, and extending. So you see there in the top, there's our teacher language for what we would be talking about. And then in the bottom row there, that is what the student language would be. So in connection to literacy, this is all around their ability to make meaning from text and express themselves in a variety of modes. So we're looking at comprehending, connecting, analyzing, and then creating and communicating for a variety of purposes. So that encompasses both that reciprocity of reading and writing. So here's an example of kindergarten English language arts, some learning goals that you might be looking at in this term 3. And so what we've done is broken it out into, on the left, you can see there's some teacher language. So this is goals that we'd be setting for students in our language, and then how we might talk about that with our students or equip them with this language so that they can share and communicate what they are able to do in relation to those learning goals in kindergarten. And you see that scale at the bottom there in yellow. So again, more of that positive language is almost able to, working on, continues to, and then moving forward needs to. So pulling on those and then looking at the ELA curriculum and the curricular competencies to tease out and create those really intentional, clear, specific statements for year-end reporting about what we've been working on, what you've been supporting your students with, and where they are on that continuum in the proficiency scale. So here's an example report card based on some learning goals. So this is Clea, so a fictional grade 1 student, and she'd be considered developing in her ELA. So you can see here what's highlighted in blue, or the blue font, are her areas of strength. So interested in reading stories about animals, makes meaningful connections when she's talking about her reading. So good areas to build on. Able to read basic books. So that's helping with her reading ability as she moves towards more complex text. So we're shifting into that growth area. She can discuss character, setting, and events in detail, which is fabulous. She can write the first sounds and last sounds correctly. And then, so here's some next steps, some wording or language for that. So next steps would be practice saying words slowly, matching the words in books with the words she's saying, and then practicing trying to write vowel sounds in her words. So sometimes it's reminding our students pretty much all words have a vowel in them, and so they can sound it out. Maybe they have a vowel chart, make their best guess, and even if they're not right, it's going to make it more readable, and it's an approximation towards the proper spelling eventually, and mastering that word in terms of encoding and decoding. Courtney, all of the links for everything I'm showing now are on the Padlets. If I had my lovely co-host Jen here, she could be entering that link in the chat box while I'm presenting, but it's tricky for me to do both. Sometimes if I enter things in the chat box, I lose my screen sharing. So if anyone else does have the Padlet open on your computer as well, and you want to drop the link into the chat box, then everyone can access it that way too. So, and here are our possible sentence starters. Oh, thanks, Cheryl. Thank you. Possible sentence starters using that descriptive feedback and the strength-based language again. So again, assessing where your students are with a literacy skill or strategy, and then pairing it with what is the curricular competency we're working on in oral language or reading or writing? What have we been working on? And I really appreciate how it's very clear language, and yet it's gentle, but it's also effective. And I think for parents, so much of this, we're communicating student learning to our students, but we're also communicating it to their parents. And I think they appreciate the clarity and also the fact that there is the positive frame and the lens that we're looking at where their students are. That so much of them being at promise and everything is just a yet. We're not there yet. We're working on it still. We're still building up those skills and we're still practicing. So these are screenshots from the ministry. So they're criteria categories. They're criteria just for K-3 ELA. And this was new to me since the last time I had been on the website digging around. So I thought, again, it's pulling it out really simply. If you look at the ELA curriculum, the PDFs with the big ideas and the standards and the competencies, it can feel overwhelming and a lot. So to look at this here, the criteria category, engaging and questioning, what that looks like in K1. And then you shift over to the right, what it looks like in grade 2 and 3. So just a little tiny bit more developed on that continuum. The proficiency is increasing in very small increments. So then we've got processing. And you see there K1, there's so much of that heavy lifting, those foundational literacy skills, the encoding, the decoding, the word work, the phonics, the phonological awareness, the phonemic awareness. And then grade 2, 3, you can see that. Now they're just using those decoding skills and reading strategies to decipher text. And so maybe this helps us sometimes take the pressure off feeling like we need to send them off in June to their next year's teacher, just being absolute rock stars and able to do everything 100% super well, when really we've spent the whole year moving them along. And so we've moved them along, and then we'll get them ready for next year, and they'll continue their learning journey at whatever pace they're at, wherever they're at, but we're supporting them all towards this proficiency level. And then the last one, constructing and creating. So if you are looking for something clear, not that this is the Coles notes, it's just I feel like this is an outline, and I really appreciated how clear and concise this was, because in report card time to get bogged down in all of the resources, that information on the ministry website, it can feel a little daunting sometimes. And they also include this sample. So this is applying everything on there for kindergarten students. So a fictitious student named Nora, and what it would look like. So you see there on the left, there's that column kindergarten criteria, which is what I had just showed you in the last slide. And then here's an example of the teacher's descriptive feedback for Nora in relation to engaging and questioning, processing, and so on. And then the goal setting. So we're tying it to the curriculum. What are the criteria? What's some descriptive feedback we can provide for this student? And then next steps and goal setting. Where do we want them to go? And especially at this time, going off into summer, with summer reading loss being very real, we want to do what we can to convey to parents as well how important it is to keep their students engaged in literacy activities and reading and writing and visiting the library and all of those wonderful things, and reading at home, reading with peers, with their siblings and their parents. We really want to encourage and reinforce the importance of that as well. So here's an example, and you might recognize that shade of grayish green. This is from the old performance standards. So here's a writing sample of a grade 1 student. And so it says, this is a poem of friends. Friends are nice to each other. And that continues on. So if this was your student and you were looking at this, feel free to enter in the chat box. We won't spend long on this because I've got a few more examples, but what would you say this student understands as a writer? I'm definitely noticing great finger spaces. That's something. I'm noticing end punctuation. Some sight words are known. Yeah, sense of sentence, absolutely. And even the word friends is tricky. And the word other, you can see they've got the sound. Letter formation, pretty good. So yeah, so some phonics, the vowel sounds, poem. It's funny, poem and poem. I've heard people from other provinces say that here in BC, we say poem differently. I don't know if you say it as one syllable or two, poem. So again, we could look at here and analyze, what is the student learning to, and what would you recommend for their goal to move forward? So just a possibility there, an example. I'm going to give you another one here. So this is a writing sample from another grade 1 student. So a friend is special to me. I like it when my friend is nice to me. A friend, ... the writing continues. So again, if this is just taking some from the previous slide, the areas of strength, again, you can add in. What are you noticing that the student is able to do, is beginning to understand, and what their next steps might be? I mean, definitely beautiful letter formation, right? We've got capitals. Yeah. So for next steps, if there were some students like this, like they got the word special right, and then like it is something that they are still learning. So you think about what would be if I just was walking around the classroom and I saw this, what might I say to the student? If there's like a teaching point or a next step, or for next time, or I'm going to show you a trick to remember this, what might be something you would say? We'll go here. Okay. So now here's a grade 2 sample. And again, I invite you enter anything you think, what you would say the student understands or the learning, or what their goal would be. So my daddy plays my games with me. My mommy read with me. Sometimes I go with my daddy to work. My mommy does her laundry. My daddy works all night. Capitalize mommy and daddy. Sentence structure. Yeah, there's a definite rhythm to it, isn't there? And it's very conversational. This would be very similar to probably, this echoes what they would tell you in conversation. And that writing is their conversations. We're starting to document them and write them down. Okay. And now here's another writing sample, grade 2. My family likes to go for bike rides on the dike. Me and my dad like to ride our dirt bikes. Me and my mom like to go to movies. Me and my sister like to play outside. and I like to read. This summer, me and my mom, my dad, my sister, my grandma, and grandpa might go to Disneyland. So very conversational. What else might you notice? What's your observation on this student and what they are? What's the strength? Something that they could work on. Yeah, some really nice spelling there. Definitely good sense of structure. Thanks, Laura. Yeah. Yes, commas in a list. Thank you. Thanks, Audra. That would be my next step too. And I'm thinking, wow, this kid's got a big family, very lucky. So the punctuation. Yeah. And so with words like might, spelled M-I-T-E, what do we know about what they're able to hear? Yes, thanks, Gloria. Stayed on topic for sure. Didn't start telling us what they had for dinner last night. And very sequential. So a nice sense of order. All right. So hopefully that was just a quick little, yes, thank you. Here the long I. What other long I pattern do you know? So some really nice, gentle invitations as next steps or learning goals. And hopefully going through these 4 samples, you see the continuum from early grade 1 to late grade 2. They really do make huge leaps and strides in this time. And so for us to move them along and have that encouragement, but also the patience that we are getting them there. So thank you. Okay. And in preparation for this workshop, I did reach out to the manager of curriculum implementation supports at the ministry. And I said, I feel like we've all been waiting for some new performance standards to come out for quite a while now. Can you tell us what the status is so that I can share it at my workshop on June 7th? And so she got back to me and she said that there are new ministry materials coming out on June 16th. So they're going to be on the ministry's website. They're still going to be up for review and open for educators to provide feedback for the ministry through until January. So these, like the core competencies did back in 2016, they'll be in draft form for a while, and then they will incorporate feedback from you and everyone around the province and make a final version after that. But they really consulted a lot of stakeholders in different educational roles around the province for sure. So, and what they're calling this is sort of branded, this collection is BC Learning Pathways. So there'll be K to 12 learning progressions in literacy and numeracy. There'll be curricular connections, so linking literacy and numeracy learning opportunities, and then examples of the learning activities. As well, teaching and learning stories. So this is student work samples and then teachers explaining why this sample is proficient, what, like showing the process and kind of that peek inside behind the curtain for here's what teachers are working through, here's some student work, and here's what we're thinking about it in terms of assessment. And then some teaching guides and materials for teachers to use. So we're quite excited to see what this looks like. So if you are interested, you can put a note in your calendar to check back the website on the 16th or after. And please do, I know they really value feedback. So give them your feedback if you have some, because there is time for them. They are considering everybody's perspectives and feedback, and they will be taking that into account before they publish the final version early in 2024. A little break before we shift into some playful learning and the core competencies. It's a little bit of a gear shift. You want to tell me in the chat box either if you could transport magically anywhere, tomorrow be anywhere in the world, sort of thinking of holiday mode, where would you be? Or if you want to share what was your absolute favorite subject when you were in elementary school that you just loved, that you would have loved to have done all day if you could. So favorite place you'd love to go to if reality wasn't an issue. This is a really fabulous article. I did link it out. It's included in the Padlet. It's from Harvard's Graduate School of Education, and it really was geared toward an audience of parents. So this might be something you might want to share with your parent community as well, but looking at the value of play and all of the, really the core competencies, but all of the important skills that our students are practicing and developing and negotiating. And so here we go. Here are some indicators of playful learning. And you look at this, when we give kids choice, what are they empowered to navigate? Look at all of these things that they need to be responsible for and work out with their peers, their friends, their classmates, if we're not directing everything. So it looks wonder, which to me, I just think very much of the scientific explorer mindset here. And then that delight, which is just really wonderful. I heard someone, a talk last week where someone said that how we feel when we learn something new becomes part of that learning. I just thought that was so beautiful, thinking about it being in your body and thinking how exciting it is to learn something new, or like a magical kind of feeling. And that really ties in for me with this delight. And so can we give our students the choice, the opportunities for them to have the choice, wonder, and delight? But also what I wanted to show was just really grounding it in and tying it too. So these are the big ideas for K-2 ELA. And if you sort of map these choice, wonder, and delight and all of these opportunities, it really ties in so strongly with the ELA big ideas. So listening and speaking, we're connecting, sharing about the world, playing with language, curiosity, and wonder. So we're discovering things about ourselves. We're discovering things about the world around us. And then for grade 3, these two big ideas, they're a little more sophisticated than the K-2, but very similar. Playing with language and discovery, curiosity, and the importance of that. All right. So play-based learning, not quite as simple in terms of assessment. For how do you assess play? How do you notice what students are doing, that formative assessment piece, the observation, and then where do you go with it? What's the language? How do we have those conversations with our students? So these are reporting policy guidelines. These are from the ministry. This is BC stuff. So their collection of those effective methods for gathering and evaluating this include things like this. So it's more informal. It's that stuff we do kind of by second nature on the fly, oral responses during play, quick conversation, looking at what students have drawn or painted or created, looking at things our students might have built. So pedagogical narration is really explained very well in the new early learning framework, but that's a situation where an educator is observing, recording, and sharing out some significant learning that occurred during play. So it could be photography, it could be video, it could be describing what a student said, video of their conversation. And then conversations, two-way communication, and then having students self-assess. So they can draw or create pictures and tell us, here's the criteria. When I built this structure, when I made this picture, what I was wanting to do was show this. And here's how I think I did at that. Again, we're putting it onto the students as well, having a two-way conversation about the assessment. So very much the students are actively involved in the conversations and the feedback and the reflection around their learning. And then that ties in very nicely to the core competencies as well. So just like we're teaching them to monitor their reading and writing, their literacy skills, we're wanting them to look inward for all of the curricular areas, but all the competencies and the core competencies. So just like we model what good readers do when we're doing a read aloud with our students, we need to be giving them the language and the thinking and make it explicit and reveal, here's how I'm thinking about how I'm doing as a learner. Is there something that's working well for me? Is there something that I need? Is there another support? Do I need more time? Do I need more information? Do I need a different mode? But there is research that when students are involved and they understand where they're at on a learning continuum, it really does increase and intensify their mode. So again, they have a sense of where they land in that learning continuum or the proficiency, and they feel accomplishment that they are making progress along that learning continuum. So it's not a secret from them, it's something that they can see that they're a part of. And so gradually over time, if that's part of our conversations we're having with our students day in and day out throughout the year, and we're talking about self-reflection, self-assessment, how am I doing, just like we do with the core competencies and self-reg, they're strengthening those muscles for gaining that ability to assess their own strengths, setting their own goals eventually, making plans to reach their goals, illustrations of their learning, and then looking back to reflect on their growth and their learning journey through the year. And this is what I was, they were talking about on that first slide about the know, do, understand, the model of learning. The students are understanding where they're going. They're active, they're involved. This is part of us equipping them to have those transferable skills. So assessing our own strengths, setting goals, making plans is something we want them to do when they graduate high school. And so giving them practice in primary, imagine how strong they'll be with these skills when they get to grade 11 and 12 and head off into the world. So thinking about that different ways for assessment and engaging, thinking for you, if we just said, let's say we just did a big unit on simple machines or some sort of animal in BC or a novel study. If I asked you to pick your top 3 here to show what you know about whatever unit or inquiry theme we studied, what works for you? What would be your preferred mode of showing what you know? Oh, this is so interesting. It's like we couldn't have set this up more perfectly than if I emailed you ahead of time saying, Carol, can you put this down when we get to this slide? But if you look in the chat box and look at the variety, there are no 2 people, I don't think, that picked the same. And so you think about this, if this was our classroom and I was the teacher, this is helpful information for me to think about what opportunity, what choice, what variety, what differentiation would I give? If we've all studied and focused on learning the same thing or guided by an inquiry project, how can we support students with choice to show what they know? And if I made all of you show what you know by a conversation, some of you might be thrilled, and a lot of you might really be uncomfortable or not feel like that's a strength or preference for you. And so it might not give me an accurate sense of what your learning journey was like in that unit or that focus of study. Same thing, like imagine if I said, okay, we're all going to do puppet shows. And most of us think, nope, no thanks, not interested in a puppet show. Or doing illustrations. For me, I'm not very artsy. So if I was told I had to do an illustration, I would kind of shut down and I would have like anxiety around it. So just thinking about this as well for our students, can we have responsive assessment tools and a variety of options that the students know they can draw on? So thank you for sharing there. Okay, so we're switching into the core competencies. We're on a good schedule, I think. So this I know is so familiar to us now. Poppy's been presenting. We presented on these starting in 2016 when they were draft and new, before they split out thinking to be critical and reflective as well. But we've got our orange, the communication, which is communicating and collaborating. Thinking is now creative thinking, and then critical and reflective thinking. So the reflective is a new addition when it was finalized. And then the biggest, meatiest part, the green zone there, we always say green zone, but personal and social. So personal, cultural identity, personal awareness, responsibility, social awareness and responsibility. So these are our big categories or facets. And then within them, you can see it breaks down here. So within communicating, here are these 3 facets, and collaborating, these 3 facets of what collaborating looks like for a student. Same thing here, we've got creative thinking, and then the critical and reflective thinking, which is much more that scientific investigation mindset. And then the personal and social, lots of stuff here that we can dig into. One of the things we see a lot that we're working on all the time with so many of our students day in and day out, hour in, hour out, is the self-reg piece. So can they identify how they're feeling and what they need in terms of self-soothing, but also to manage themselves to feel safe and well so that they can take risks in their learning, focus and engage with others to be productive, but also to be happy and to be engaging in our classroom communities. So when we look at how we assess the core competencies in that ongoing way, again, this is from the ministry. So for us and why we love mentor texts that support the core competencies so much is they're a really nice launching point for students. We can talk about how we can document our strengths, different areas of learning, not just reading or writing or math or science or art. So open-ended questions, prompting self-reflection. So we're building up that metacognition piece. For us to be using mentor text, but also think aloud, modeling what reflection looks like as we're learning and looking ahead to set goals. And then really supporting student ownership, giving them a lot of opportunities to document and then access their reflections through the year, to look back where they started as readers and writers in September and look at their progress. So if there's tangible, concrete evidence of that, whether that is books that they've read, or if that's responses, reading responses, if it's writing that they've done, or artwork, or photography or video documentation, really powerful for students to see their growth in terms of confidence and esteem, but also that sense of where they are on that continuum. So here's a screenshot. This is on our website, our K-3 self-assessment support document. Broken down into these 3 facets, and they're available as PDF. We also have editable versions because when we first published them, a lot of teachers emailed us and said, hey, I'd like to tweak these a little bit or change the formatting. So they're available as well in a PowerPoint version, which you can download, and then you can change them as you like. So that's available for you if you are looking for a printable resource that you can use to support your students in their self-assessment of the core competencies this month. So here's an example of one from communicating. And so the competency is I can answer simple, direct questions about my activities and experiences. So I've got a simple one here. This is my sample one, my exemplar to show you. This is how it can look if you're thinking about this. So I was in a group, I shared 3 of my favorite things with the group. So I shared what my favorite book was, what my favorite sport was, and my favorite food. So I'm writing this down, but also I could just have a picture. So if I'm a younger student, early writer, I can be writing with just a picture. So this big box on the right is meant to be a flexible space for documentation. So in familiar situations, I can cooperate with others. And so here's an example from Jen on flowers on her lovely deck up in the Shuswap Lake. And she said, Steve and I planted flowers together. We decided which flowers would look nice together and where to put the pots on the deck. Then we planted the flowers together in one pot at a time. So really simple, not necessarily anything to do with the curriculum, but it's about those social communication, cooperation, collaboration, exchanges that we have a million of in class every day. So for social awareness and responsibility, I can help and be kind. Again, it could be as simple as I check in on my friends. If they seem sad, I try to cheer them up by making them laugh or by offering to play a game with them. So we wanted this to be sort of an example at a level that a primary student might say. So for us, if we were doing this on our own right now, it might be a bit different. And then I can describe some of the qualities that make me special. Here's me pretending I can play the keyboard guitar. I'm not really sure what that is, but so my special quality, I'm very good at music trivia. I helped my trivia team win the finals and we got a bunch of prizes. So that's something that I would talk about with pride. I could draw a picture, I could have a photo there, whatever works. So what I'm going to get you to do now is I'm going to invite you just under a minute on the music timer. So reflect and assess a special quality of your own. and share it in the chat box. So think about for you, if you chose your special quality and if you represented it somehow on a sheet like this and showed it to your students, I think they would really connect with that. They would connect with you. And it would be a really nice way for them to see, oh, let's have a great conversation. Let's turn and talk. What do I think my special qualities are? And what's something that I could draw or represent to show what I'm good at? Oh my gosh, all of these special qualities are just heartwarming. Thank you for sharing these, everyone. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, there is research on the how and the why of the impact of using mentor text as a bridge or an anchor or a launch for core competencies, focus for thinking, reflecting, conversations, and growth. So we can be more intentional about the core competencies, but also for students to connect to the characters in a story and the struggle that the character might be facing, or a dilemma or a problem, and that conflict resolution or a challenge. If it's one of those times where students can see themselves in a story and relate, and because of it's in a story and it's not them, they can relate, but it's different. So we can all have a conversation about how the character is handling it and what they might have felt like. So it makes it safer and not quite so vulnerable to students to share, because we're talking, the book is the anchor and the prompt for that. So we can talk about, why do you think the character did this? Why do you think Ralph wanted to go get a drink of water when his teacher was asking him to write a story? Why do you think he crawled under his desk? What do you think he might be feeling? What's he doing? He's avoiding. Yeah. Why do you think he doesn't want to write? Having those conversations can be so rich, and we can really go deep with them in a very short amount of time through an interactive read aloud. So this is what I was referring to earlier. So some books to launch core competencies, thinking and conversations. So if you have the PDF, you can see these blue links with the lines. It links out to the books so you can see what the books are about if you're not familiar with them. But there are a lot of really popular books that I bet you have some of them in your classroom library or your school library. And there's probably thousands and thousands and thousands more of them. But you've probably got your favorites, as we all do. So this PDF list is in the Padlet as well. And I wanted to share just one example of a really beautiful book. So Brad Montague is an author. He's got a fabulous YouTube channel, and he does really cute little animated videos. We've shared some of them before at the end of our workshops in the past. And so he's done the illustrations with his wife, which is really cool. And just thinking about how we could use this, what kind of conversations would you then launch into with your students in and around and through reading a book like this? Again, his YouTube channel is really cute, his little videos. And just as we wrap up, I wanted to share some exciting news. Yeah, Shelley, beginning of the year, end of the year, see how their circles have grown. And just what a nice common language to have for our students. There's issues, the social things that happen around inclusion and exclusion, and similarities and differences about our circles. So yes, we are just about to have our website updated. And so this is a screenshot of what our homepage is going to look like. It's going to be very different, and we're so excited. It's just been about 8 or 10 years, and so we were ready for a refresh. So this will be coming out in the next few weeks. So all of our resources will still be there. It'll just look a little bit different. And we'll probably give a quick little guided tour when we start doing our workshops in September. So just to give you the heads up that is coming, and we're very excited about it. So it'll look different, same great resources on there. And the company that's designing it for us actually has included and incorporated, we really have loved using the Padlets this year to support our workshops, to have a collection of resources tied to each workshop. And so that feature is going to be built in. So everything, the website will be more of a one-stop shop for all things, for all of our workshops, in terms of registering for them online and then getting the handouts, having the on-demand video after. It's going to be just little bundles of resources, and we're so thrilled.